Hey everybody, welcome to the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club episode for July, the true last episode of the regular season of the Westside Fairytales. If you're new here and you're confused about what's going on, don't worry, this isn't a trick. This is not a normal episode. These are things that I do in between regular episodes to elucidate and go into a little bit more on the recommendations for the month made at the beginning of the regular episode. You don't have to listen to these. They aren't crucial to understand anything about the Westside Fairytales, but it's just me hanging out, talking to folks. And with that in mind, how are you guys doing? I hope you're all well. I hope the regular season treated you good and you had a good time. I'm happy that I'm done recording. This is one of the last things I'm going to be recording, aside from some stuff with another project that I work on this summer, which is good because it's 1,000,000 degrees. And if you don't follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you've probably never seen pictures of the inside of the Blanket Fort, which is my makeshift recording studio, which actually works fairly well. Oh, God damn it. Except for the fact that I've got to mute 17 different fucking things to make sure that they don't start going off while I'm in the middle of recording, which invariably they do. This is live-ish, so I don't really have the time to go through and take all that out. But man, stuff. I start this off talking about stuff I've been listening to and looking at and reading lately. Some sort of offhand recommendations, and there's a show called Joe Bob's The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder, and folks, it is fucking amazing. It's basically a better version of what I do, that I almost wish I would have seen before I started doing these horror and lit club things on the off of the main feed on the Patreon where they started. Just because they're so much fun. And Joe Bob stuff is great. He gives out the tidbits. If you've never heard of Joe Bob Briggs, I hadn't either until like last week. He is a sort of country, down-home country lover of good old-fashioned exploitation horror films, blood and guts and glory. It's fucking awesome. And basically, the show is you kind of watch a movie, a random whatever movie of his selection that's in the horror genre. And he sort of interrupts it throughout and goes to these little segments that take place in ostensibly what's supposed to be a trailer park, but really is pretty much just his set somewhere, probably in California. But man, I've been getting really exposed to a lot of classic horror stuff that I'd never really had time before, but that you'd heard of. The first episode, it's all on Shudder, is called Chud, and Chud, Chud is like legendary. It's a legendary horror film that nobody has ever seen. And honestly, you don't really ever have to see it. Chud stands for cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, but also for something else they revealed during the movie. It's incredibly stupid. It's kind of a bad movie. And not in like a fun bad way. It's bad in that it's completely uninteresting, like almost stunningly uninteresting. There's almost no chuds in the film, which Joe Bob talks about right from the beginning. I guess they had a fairly decent budget to make the film with, but they didn't spend enough of it on creature costumes, and so the actual chuds, the monsters are barely in the movie. But the movie kind of feels like it's better than a normal movie because it's full of all these like Broadway type actors. Well, not even Broadway type, like literal Broadway actors. All these dudes were all friends in New York City, and somehow they got money together to make this movie. And so there's like a bunch of like startlingly like good acting, but like it's a bad script, so it none of it jives well. And it completely falls apart towards the end. But there's been some other great ones. There's been some movies that are going to totally end up as recommendations on next month's or next year's next seasons. I don't even know how to say it because it starts in the year, but it's the next season. So next season's horror recommendations for sure. Especially there's one called Society, which is by far one of the most bizarre, gross movies I've ever seen in my life, and is almost perfect. And then there's also Q the Winged Serpent, which might be one of my favorite horror movies I've ever seen. And it'll end up in recommendations too. If you guys don't follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you totally should. So you can get pictures of random creepy stuff that I run into in the wilds of Louisville, Kentucky, which there's actually horrifying weird shit everywhere around here. We never run shy of it. I don't know why. It's just it's a creepy older city in the middle of America. Decaying buildings. I live in a really old part of town called Germantown. That's just full of alleyways and broke things, and you just find shit. And you can get in on the action too. Join us on Instagram. The Instagram's Westside Fairytales. You can get on Facebook. My Facebook is just facebook.com/Westside Fairytales, or you can join the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club. And come in and talk to me about the books and talk to other fans about horror and reading and pretty much anything else that kind of just piques your interest that's in those categories. It's all pretty great stuff, and if you want to know more about what's going on with the Westside Fairytales, it's a great place to be because those people know first. They are at the cutting edge of Westside Fairytales news. Speaking of which, the Westside Fairytales news that you need to know is we broke up with our person who was supposed to be doing our merch. It's an amicable breakup. It's just that person was way too busy to get stuff done, and so I'll be taking that over, and hopefully we'll be having some. We're going to be working on the shop tonight to date this episode. But it should be up sometime in the next couple weeks, and I'm just going to be handling it on my own from then on. It's not like the hard part is really if you've never had to fuck with merch sales, and if any of my friends out there that are in the podcast game would tell you that setting up merchandise is literally you have to learn an entire new skill. I mean, that is really what the podcast game, really the creativity game is about. That's the true test of a creative person, is if you can continue learning new shit. The making stuff is incidental. Your actual skill that you're being graded on, whether you know it and understand it or not, is your ability to just learn things and like grow from them and grow with them, and then at the end of that, you kind of put it back out there into the world. So, in writing, it's most obvious is like, well, I don't know anything about autopsies, but I want to write about autopsies for this thing. So now it's time to go and become a journeyman expert at autopsy stuff. And now I have to learn how to do merch sales, which is a whole thing, man. It's a whole thing. Thank God for print on demand, because I don't know how it would have even been possible before that. If you guys don't know what print on demand is, POD, it's pretty much how most people do merchandise stuff now. It's actually a really good balance between cost and income. You get a much worse cut of the sales, right? So, normally when you go and you buy a t-shirt at a store, the store is actually speculating. Most retailers are actually gambling, although you wouldn't think it if you don't understand how it works. But what you're really doing is you're saying, I have a store, I have a front. People come to me for certain types of things. I think that this collection is going to sell, and I think I'm going to sell on average 50 mediums, 10 larges, 2 extra larges, 80 smalls, and then like maybe 5 or 6 extra smalls, blah, 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 blah. So you have to buy those. And if somebody comes in and they can't find their size, they're not going to spend money. They're going to leave and try to go somewhere else. And if people come in and they don't like it, they won't buy it, and then you're out the money anyway. So you're always kind of like trying to guess on whether or not you can get those customers, which if you're even in that world is a hard thing to do. That's one of the biggest reasons retailers are failing. It's not because there's no interest in buying products from brick and mortar stores. It's just that the old way of doing things, it has completely lost its ability to work in the modern environment. Where once upon a time you could get by on that gamble by saying, well, at the end of the day, I'm the only motherfucker that sells polo shirts on 8th Street. And if you want a polo shirt, people need those polo shirts. They're going to be coming to me because I'm the guy. I'm the guy that's got that stuff. But you can't do that anymore. So all these big box retailers that basically operated by being the only, I'm sorry, I'm moving a box of envelopes. It's the loudest noise on earth. But these big box retailers that were the only guys on the block, and they basically worked by saying like, hey, I've made it so that there is no competition save for me. They rested on their laurels too long, and now places like Macy's are getting their teeth kicked in and straight down their throats, as they rightfully should. Because as much as they're whining and bitching and moaning, they did the same thing to like actual stores owned by normal human beings that were just, little mom and pop deals. 20 or 60 years ago or whatever now. So they had it coming, man. You had it fucking coming. And it's actually interesting to see all these smaller retailers popping up where these big guys used to be. They're all over where I live. There's tiny little boutique places that sell shirts you can only get anywhere, and they're playing the game. They're playing the gamble, and it's they own the market in this case because they're not selling, mass marketed, overprinted 70 million run T-shirts the way that like PacSun and them did, where everybody's going to have that same goddamn Volcom shirt at the beginning of the school year. Instead, they sell stuff that you can only get there because they only make a little bit of it, and so that's actually able to work. And I know all of this stuff now because I've been having to study merch things so that I can try to monetize that, because I know that there's a demand. People are always telling me, we want shirts. I want coffee mugs. I want books. I want this. I want that. And I'm like, fuck, I want to get it to you guys, but I don't know how. And I don't want to just jump into it, because another thing that you learn really fast in the podcasting and in the entertainment industry in general is that half of the money that gets traded around in the entertainment industry is just basically people trading off other motherfuckers not knowing they're getting scammed. It's just scam after scam after scam. And even if it's not like something that's full on fraud, it's just just creating situations where you're just getting way more money than you deserve from somebody because they don't know better, which I found it's very much the case with certain places. A lot of people go with, well, I won't name them, but there's certain like places they sell T-shirts. Like, oh, well, I need to sell T-shirts, and they come to you first. They're like, hey, you need to you got number 5 on the Stitcher charts in December or whatever. Hey, we want to partner with you to make T-shirts. And then you start sending them emails and be like, okay, well, what do you offer? And they're like, well, you can just go to our website. And then it's like a selection of multiple different like texts and fonts and font sizes, because they're copy and pasting stuff from maybe some corporate flowchart that they're being paid to send emails out on. And these places are terrible because of multiple reasons, but most of it is because they do all of the work for you, and they do it poorly, of course. And still, so they can just, they pull up $1, they send out a shirt kind of deal. I'm trying to do this much better. I'm going to be going with a pretty well-established company. I'm going to be setting up all my store stuff on my own. I'm going to have to do some coding, which isn't really that hard because I won't actually be coding shit. Somebody else will have already coded something 16 fucking years ago, and I'll just be copy pasting it onto my site, and then it will automatically work, because that's the real truth of programming. If people don't know it, you almost never program anything yourself unless you're fucking a code writer. Half the time you're just copying script from somebody else and plugging it into your thing, and then making changes to a few variables. Or so I've been told. Because actual coding is really fucking hard, and it's exhausting. It's something that if you're good at it and you like doing it, absolutely do it, because people will pay you to do it for them because they don't want to. C++, man, I tried HTML back when I was in college. I tried to teach myself HTML because I figured I would need to know how to use it, and I do, and I can't. It's way too fucking hard. I'm dumb as shit. But anyhow, all of that aside, merch is for sure coming. We're gonna start with probably some like logo T-shirts type deals, maybe a few coffee mug type things. But the place that I'm going with, you can make a lot of different options available, and we're gonna be fucking with that. We're gonna be doing that shit, and hopefully it all works really well, and everybody gets stuff. What I'm actually most excited about is we're gonna be able to sell posters, which is, I think, pretty cool considering the art section that we have with the podcast. I actually want it to be. I wanted the store, the merch store on my site to be more than just like some stupid shit. I want there to be like variety more than just like, hey, you can get the baby doll tee, or throw you around, you can also get the men's tee in 3 different sizes. No, we're gonna have all kinds of stuff there, and I'm making promises. I will deliver. No doubt about that. Anybody that's still with me after 16 minutes of me rambling, if you haven't been here for the rambles, they do start. So all that aside, let's get into the recommendations. And actually, before I get into the recommendations, I'd like to send a shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Stitcher Premium, and I'm going to read some stuff from them. So hey, you guys, I want to take a second to recommend some great podcasts that are available now on Stitcher Premium. If you're looking for some new true crime, then check out True Crime Garage Off the Record, the latest project from True Crime Garage hosts Nick and the Captain. Join them each week as they revisit some of the most haunting cases they've covered to date. This is a compilation of hidden treasures, a chance to dive deeper, discuss new theories, and get updates on your favorite episodes of True Crime Garage. Or if you're looking for something a little different, comedian Chris Gethard's Beautiful Stories from Anonymous People opens the phone line to one anonymous caller, and Chris can't hang up first, no matter what. From shocking confessions and family secrets to philosophical discussions and shameless self-promotion, anything can and will happen. I should actually check that out. Stitcher Premium also has a new ad-free episodes of cult favorite My Favorite Murder and hit shows from the Wondery Network like Dr. Death and The Vanished podcast, plus thousands of hours of original content, early access to new releases, exclusive bonus episodes and archives, and hundreds of stand-up comedy albums for when you need a laugh. And when the fuck don't you need a goddamn laugh right now? I have a hardline thing that I don't get political on the show, and I won't start getting it now. But you cannot turn on you can't turn on Facebook now without everybody's dumb fucking opinions about shit just raining down on you like, I don't know, something that hurts to be rained down on by. Hail. Just hail. Hail that smells bad. Bad smelling rock salt or rocks of ice from the sky hitting you in the head. So man, if you wanna get away from that and chuckle it up and listen to some cool murder stories and shit of that nature, man, go to StitcherPremium.com and use promo code Fairytales to get a free month's trial of Stitcher Premium. That's StitcherPremium.com, promo code Fairytales. Check it out now. Our show's on Stitcher too. Some of you might be listening to it. I hope that's the case. Anyway, on to our first thing, which is something I've actually really wanted to be talking about for a while. This month's recommendation is The Thing, the 1982 movie by John Carpenter. My favorite creature movie ever. It is my favorite horror movie, tied for first place with Jacob's Ladder, which both of them have like really incredible practical effects that aren't like really obtrusive and very not big. Even though even in The Thing, you feel like the scale of the monster is huge, but when you really look at it, it almost never is. It's kind of a tiny thing. Well, and people-sized stuff. But if you don't know anything about The Thing, it was released in 1982. It had a $15 million budget and was considered a flop at the time. I think it made 19 million-ish dollars in the box office, which, if you guys don't know the breakdown, movies basically need to make twice their budget to be considered a success. It's not even that's really not a true flop, because at least it made its production budget back, but usually they spend as much on production as they do on marketing. It's kind of like a rule of thumb, although it's not always the case. Anybody that's seen one of those movies that comes out and you never heard a fucking thing about it, that's the movie they didn't spend any marketing money on. So, excuse me, that usually makes all of its money back. And also, usually the box office sales are something of an indicator of home sales. At the time, I don't think there was much in the way of home video. 1982, if I remember my history right, you're basically right at the advent of like Betamax, and video cassette recorders are just a little bit after that. So basically, when something's in a movie theater, in those 80s, 70s and stuff, unless you're a fairly wealthy person, you're not going to be seeing that movie again once it's out of theaters. And, the theaters, very much the same thing. The retails I was talking about before, it's all speculation. You know what I mean? You're gonna show what you think people are gonna come in, see, and spend money on popcorn and stuff. The theaters actually, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this. I've done no research, but theaters really don't make a lot of money off of the things that are being played themselves. Most of their money actually comes from jacked up food and concession prices to keep stuff going. If you think about it, that actually kind of makes sense. Despite the size of movie theaters and stuff, they really have a pretty low operating overhead. The movies pay for themselves, functionally speaking, because they want to have those movies placed. They don't have to really rent the movie, because the ticket money is going to the people that actually own the rights to the movie, that are distributing it and stuff. The distributors pay for the distribution. They make all the copies and stuff. All you're getting at a movie theater really is just the cost of running the projector and cleaning the place. And then everything else, jacked up soda prices and stuff, concessions. That's how you make your money. So you're actually, when you go to a movie theater, you're actually going to a terrible restaurant with awful overpriced food so that you can watch a movie at that restaurant. If you, technically speaking, I guess. But in the case of The Thing, it had a short run. It was considered a flop, and most of that's because America's in a recession. If I remember correctly, the 1982 recession. I've lived through like fucking 4 recessions now at 30. To the point, every single one of the recessions is like, this is the worst recession since the Great Depression. I think the worst one I survived was the Great Recession of the 07 to 09 era. The housing collapse is how normally people call it, but people are trying to call it the Great Recession, which doesn't have the ring that the Great Depression have. It's like America just walked down into cold water real fast and got it on its balls and had the Great Recession sucked up in there. Drop them on his butt, they'll pop back out. Oh God, if you guys don't know anything about receded testicles, because you're a lady, I've seen it happen before. Kids can get hit in the nads and their balls go up into their body cavities, and then you have to like have them cross their legs and you drop them on their butt from like a foot and a half off the ground, and it pops them back out. And if it doesn't, it hurts really bad. Like, it hurts terribly, terribly bad. It's never happened to me, thank God. But that was always a thing we talked about in school. And then once you graduate school, no one ever talks about it again. Just like getting the breath knocked out of you. No one ever gets the breath knocked out of them anymore. I guess it's because everybody I know doesn't play on swing sets. But I just remember that was a thing. It happened to me like 5 or 6 times. I think the first time it ever happened to me, I thought I was dying. I was as all true children do. I was misusing a slide, climbing up it instead of sliding down it, and I fell off the side of it and landed flat on my back, and I literally lost all of the air in my lungs and just sat there panicking, dying for like 5 minutes. It felt like it was probably 10 seconds, and everyone's like, "Oh, he got the breath knocked out of him." It's classic childhood shit, man. You don't hear about that anymore. But I mean, I suppose it has to happen to somebody. But anyway, the movie came out in the early 1980s, and there was a recession going on. And when recession's going on, especially back in the day, people the really like I just want to turn my brain off and watch something was very much the case with media back then. Although things were sort of changing, and there was some like really cool avant-garde stuff that kind of was becoming more available in the popular world, but like there wasn't the internet and stuff. And so like if you had time for entertainment, you couldn't really pick between a lot of things. You had to go for one thing, and people went to go and have an enjoyable creature movie, and they saw one of the best creature movies ever made, but it's the same year that like E.T. came out. So people wanted to go see E.T. and forget about all of the fucking bread lines and folks losing their jobs, and instead they saw a movie about paranoid Americans in a desolate landscape being killed and consumed by this secret monster. And so that maybe that reminder that struck a little too close to home, and it was too miserable, and people just didn't like it. It was panned by critics who didn't like that it wasn't based on. It wasn't a remake. It was a remake. The original story that it's based on is called Who Goes There? It's a 1938 novella by John W. Campbell. And the original novel is fairly similar to the end product that we got with this movie. However, The Thing from Another World, which everybody's probably heard before, The Thing from Another World was the original movie adaptation of the 1938 novel, which was just a corny 50s era silver screen horror movie, a goofball thing. From what I understand, I've never seen it. I don't really care to. I would at best only be comparing it to one of the best fucking horror movies ever made. Maybe I will, but I've never seen it available for free streaming, and I'm not gonna fucking pay to see it. I hate those old silver screen horror movies. I have no love in my heart for them. I didn't grow up with them. Like there's sort of a nostalgia for that time that got impressed upon me growing up. I was born in the 80s and kind of grew up in the 90s. And if you don't know that much about that time, there was a sort of nostalgia for the 1950s that was fucking awful and overpowering and stuff. I think it's a lot of the reason why Stephen King got so big is everything that he writes or wrote basically is kind of a throwback to the 1950s and 1960s. And in the 90s and 80s, late 80s and early 90s, especially, there's a really, really strong, like, drive-in movies, Cadillacs with flared fenders, kind of, chrome and red paint. And that aesthetic was kind of big. And, people had this sort of love of those old, cheesy thing from another world. Yeah, what's going to happen? These teenagers are in some trouble, Barry. And I've seen those movies, and they do nothing for me. Like, that's not the kind of horror I grew up with. You know what I mean? So I understand people that are older than me, or that, sometimes folks just have like a love for that era. I have none in my heart. My shit is slasher movies and weird body horror shit, because that's what I grew up with. My horror was not drive-in movies horror or even like exploitation stuff. It was like anything that would show up on the Sci-Fi Channel when I was like 12, and anything that I could kind of like sneak and look at and listen to from my room when my parents would get scary movies and send me to bed early. Which I think is really like one of my first approaches to being a horror writer, was just trying to imagine what all these awful sounds that I could hear through the door, what those were. I feel like if they would have let me watch the movies, they would have been less traumatizing to me than me sitting in my room alone in the dark, listening to like just the distant, like high violin, like just, terrifying scores and like the occasional scream and then like some sort of crunching, chewing noise. I'm like, what could be making that? And then boiling off in young Tyler's brain was that thing. But people in the 90s or 80s, I guess, too. In the 80s, it was especially fucking bad. The 50s nostalgia. but they wanted that corny ass fucking thing from Another World movie to come back, because I guess they thought that that's what it was going to be. E.T. was out, and fucking Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Everybody wanted to believe that aliens were kind of cool and a good thing. And The Thing was sort of like the first walk out into aliens are trash. I don't know. I really don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it's definitely from that era. And then after that, you have just worse and worse movies with aliens. You get Predator, which is weirdly similar. The intro of The Thing and of The Predator is almost exactly the same. There's a sort of distant shot of Earth as a smallish, to a third of the screen at the bottom right, and then there's just like a little spaceship. In Predator, it's landing, obviously, and then in The Thing, it's like wiggling because it's damaged. But they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. They panned it, and it was considered a flop and almost fucked up John Carpenter's career. But he made it through. The movie earned 19.6. It stars Kurt Russell as MacReady, Keith David as Childs, Wilford Brimley's in it. The cast is stunning, and like really, the cast is this movie. And if they would have miscast anybody, it would have been awful. There's some weird. Jay Leno was almost in this film as one of the sort of comedic characters, which would have been just absurd. Jay Leno's acting career was short and terrible, but he's really. There's one movie where I think it's him and like an old lady, and he's like a fucking police officer, and they're trying to solve something. Or maybe that's Sly Stallone, but. The movie follows basically MacReady's character, Kurt Russell's character is the main character. Everybody else is they're all on this Arctic research station, which is a very like Lovecraftian kind of feel. It's this research, these scientists out in an inhospitable area, and I think the winter storms are about to start blowing in, so they're going to be completely cut off from civilization. A dog runs into the camp, chased by some crazy ass Norwegians, shooting it from the helicopter and trying to throw death charge explosives onto the dog to kill it, and it makes it out. And from here on out, by the way, folks, it's spoilers. It's spoiler city. I'm gonna be talking about the movie fairly in depth. And yeah, the literally what the Norwegians are yelling. If you speak Norwegian or Swedish, I think it's Norwegian. I don't think they're Swedes. What they're screaming is, "Hey, watch out! It's not a dog. It's a thing." So they ruined the movie right there for you if you're bilingual. But fortunately, it was released to American audiences, and we can barely fucking speak enough Spanish to get by in Puerto Rico. Really just barely enough English to get by on our taxes. So, not a lot of worry about that, although I'm pretty sure the foreign audiences might have been a little miffed. They might have changed the entire feel of it, but I've known that The Thing was a thing. I've seen that movie 80 times. It still has never ruined anything for me. From there, they find that the dog doesn't get along well with the other dogs. They put it in the kennel. They have like little sled dogs. That's what they're there for, the huskies. And Then the dog morphs, it kills a bunch of the other dogs and infects one of the other people, and you get to see one of the other guys that's infected before the change gets finished. So like even a small cell from this thing can turn you into one of the things, which is such a fucking horrifying. That's a high value, high risk. Kind of what do we call it, mechanism for your horror monster to do. Normally it's something that's close enough to me, it's got sharp stuff, it'll disassemble my body until all of my blood leaks out of it, my brain will cease functioning, and I have died. As opposed to this thing, which literally becomes other people with just even a slight bit of infection, and it all becomes part of this much larger organism that can separate and think for itself, but always is trying to combine into a much larger superstructure. And it's really a movie about paranoia and trust and mind games that you can play, and it's just a fucking blast. And it has one of the best scenes, which is actually in the original novel, and it's what convinced writer Bill Lancaster, who's notable credits include The Bad News Bears and working on the first draft of Stephen King's Firestarter, which is also another Carpenter film. I think. I can't remember if Carpenter ended up making it, but he did work on it. The test, the blood test scene, which is like one of the most legendary scenes in any horror movie. I really can't think of one that really super tops it. Maybe just like the blood coming out of the elevator in The Shining. But even that's really just an image as far as scenes go. Man. So if you don't understand, if you haven't seen it, so what's going on is they find out that the thing's parts are all still individual organisms. They're not made of disparate parts like we are. They're not bones and blood and muscle, which separated from the organism is no longer functional. They still remain their own selfish little creature. And so they take blood from everybody and they heat up wires, like a little coil of wire with a flamethrower, and they put it in the blood. And it makes a really awful hissing noise. And then you go to the next one, they untie that guy, and you get the first 3 or 4 dudes, and they get out. And then they finally put it in the one that's the monster, and it pops up, it's this big explosive thing. And the actual monster that they took it from, he's one of the guys. He looks just like a normal person. He starts freaking out and then kills the dude that's next to him. It's a fucking blast, dude. Because it's such a good. The reason it works and the reason why the movie is so good is it does stuff like that several different times, where you get the tension is building, but it's never high tension. It's never like extraordinary, where it's a hair's breadth away from death at any second. You're like, ooh, on the edge of your seat. You're really just like very calm and into it. So you actually feel like you're kind of left off the hook for a second, which catches you much more unaware than being extraordinarily tense the entire time. So like there's one part where they're trying to resuscitate somebody who seems to have died or is facing heart failure, and he's got the 2 defibrillator paddles over the chest and pushes him in, and the thing's chest opens up into a big fucking mouth and bites on his arms, which is it's a great effect. It looks good to this day, by the way. And I cannot imagine being in the theater with these fucking 1982 people seeing shit like this for the first time and being like, I don't even know how to fucking comprehend this. It actually might have just scared motherfuckers so bad they didn't know what to do. Like, that's gross. That's horrifying. I don't know how to deal with this. And really in that way, the entire movie is just completely ahead of its time and just so amazing. Like, I cannot recommend it enough. I get excited talking about it. I do not get excited talking about a lot of other things, but that fucking movie is so good, start to finish. It really is. Keith David's in it. He plays the character Childs, who's I can't remember what Childs does. He's just one of the other guys on the research station. All the jobs are pretty vague. It's not like it's in bad screenwriting. People are like, they are their job. Like McCready is the only kind of person that's really like, he is his job. He's like the aloof, drunk helicopter pilot. And he plays chess. I think actually it might have been Kurt Russell agreed to the script when he read it, and it was the note in the script for who McCready is as a character, and they don't have last names. Everybody's name is just their name, just one name: Childs, McCready, Windows, and the script notes were just helicopter pilot, drinks, plays chess. If you know anything about Kurt Russell, that's such a perfect casting for him. That is like half of the characters he's ever played. It might as well just be Iroquois Pliskin too. Does Escape from New York, which is another great movie. But I digress. Childs is played by Keith David, who's one of my favorite actors, and he's just criminally underused in stuff. He's got the best voice. I can't even do it. One of my favorite line reads in American cinema is him in what is that called? Requiem for a Dream, where he says, he just says this girl, he's basically turning a girl into a smack whore for heroin, and he just starts calling her Maid Marian. Maid Marian. I can't, his voice is fucking butter, dude. I can't do it. But those two are the last ones to survive to the end of the film, and at the end of the film, it's very vague, and there was multiple endings written for it. I can't remember exactly how Who Goes There ended. I think it's a fairly pessimistic ending, as is this one. The ending that is finally selected on, which is one of the best endings in cinema too, especially for horror movies, is not it's not a victorious ending. MacReady blows up the creature. The larger it builds itself together. They find out that one of the guys, played by Wilford Brimley, who is the diabetes guy, who actually gets like locked in a shed in Act 1 and forgotten about, functionally speaking, until the very final bit of the movie. They find out that he is one of the things, and he's been building a little tiny spaceship underneath his house, and infested some ice caves that are beneath it. And a gigantic thing. It's got a big fucking split open dog head. It looks just amazing. It's a wall of flesh just moving. MacReady blows it up with some dynamite. During the fracas, he's separated from Childs, who is off screen until they are together next to the burning remnants of the camp. It's very implicitly clear that there are no more supplies. There's no shelter. He's created a situation where no matter what, anybody that's alive there is going to freeze to death there, or burn to death, or whatever, including the creature. So they are together, and they have a bottle of scotch, right? 2 bottles of scotch, and they've been making Molotovs. This is one of the things, is they've been making Molotovs with these to throw at the creature before. Molotov cocktails, if you don't know, that's just petrol and maybe some other stuff mixed in together in a bottle with a little wick tied onto the top. You light it and you throw it, it blows up, and it's a little firebomb. So he's sitting there with a bottle of scotch, and Childs comes up, and the end of it, he's like, "Are you one of the things?" kind of deal. And he goes, "Yeah, if I am, there's not much we can do about it." And they say, yeah, and they kind of share a drink. And you don't know if maybe MacReady has gotten infected or if Childs was infected. And he's like, kind of like, "Where were you?" He's like, "Where were you?" And it's the paranoia never ends, and there is no easy out at the end of it. It's so good. And that's the taken ending. There are no alternate ending takes or anything. It's not like fucking Blade Runner. But there are some allusions made that the bottle that he hands Childs, that MacReady hands Childs, is actually one of the Molotovs. So it's full of gasoline, and the creature wouldn't know that, and it's just drinking gasoline instead of scotch, but it's fine. And so MacReady knows, like, fuck, it's one of the things. But that's always just been people's like kind of sort of headcanon type deal. It's not a big smoking gun in the film, but I like it. The other versions of the ending, I think the original ending that they wrote for it was the thing infects both MacReady and Childs and waits there until the helicopters come in the spring to take them back. And like the end line is, "Can we go somewhere warm for a bite to eat?" And something along those lines, which everyone's like, it's too corny. And there are other less ambiguous endings. But they finally ended with the ambiguousness. It's one of the best endings to a horror film, to any film really, that I've ever seen. It's just wonderful. I don't know how to say that better. But that is the thing, and it's by far one of my favorite movies. And if you haven't seen it, my spoilers would not have ruined it for you. Literally. Even if you know everything that's going to happen, I haven't actually ruined anything for you too, because I haven't ruined all of the twists and spoilers. And I've watched that movie 15, 20 fucking times in a row, and I'm still noticing stuff, and I stumble upon things online that teach me new stuff about the movie, and it's just amazing. And if you get a second, you should go and check it out. Our literature recommendation for July was Jeannette Walls' 2004 novel, The Glass Castle, which is It's a beautiful little memoir. It's most notable really for being one of the few very good memoirs, I think, at all, set in West Virginia. The movie, or not, sorry, well, there is a movie that is based on, that's based on the book, but completely, it's just ignore it. The book actually follows Jeannette Walls as a child from her childhood in Nevada, I think Battle Creek, Arizona, or something like that. And it's about her, and the real antagonist / other main character of the book is her father Rex, and then also her mother Rosemary. It's 2 words, Rosemary, not Rosemary. Rosemary. So I hate it. Fuck, I hate that name. As a child, we follow her through a lot of the American Southwest. They live in the desert. They live in extraordinary poverty. And she is, I think, the middle of 4 kids, the middle older of 4 kids. There's her sister Lori, their brother Brian, and the youngest is daughter Maureen. And it's kind of a fun, sad book from start to finish. When the main problem, the real true conflict in the book is that Ray and Rosemary are terrible parents. Rex is a pretty unrepentant drunk. While in the beginning of the book, he is kind of a fun guy. You get the impression from stories that are told about him that he's actually kind of a brilliant person. He's got an engineering degree or something to that degree. All right, okay, sorry. He's got an engineering degree, but he's wasted most of his life on quick get rich quick schemes, and trying to kind of rest on his laurels, even though he doesn't have laurels to really rest on, and he's very much a full-blown fucking like stage 3 alcoholic. He's a bad person, but his kids love him. His wife is unfailingly supportive of him for dubious reasons at best, I would say. And from Jeannette as a kid, you get to see her grow up really just believing in him because he's her dad. All the way to becoming disillusioned with him, really starting to hate him, and then finally forgiving him towards the end. And the real character arc in the show or the book is her relationship with her father. Jeannette, as a person, never really changes that much outside of the normal, typical change from childhood to adulthood, and really just kind of starting to see through the bullshit. But most of the book takes, and particularly the most formative scenes of the book, take place in Welch, West Virginia, which is a real town that I have been to, and that I base certain areas in my own novels and short stories on. Most notably, which one would be Welch? Probably Blunt, West Virginia's. No, Blunt's War. Yeah. War, West Virginia is a real place, and it's called Blunt in my books. Probably gun cotton for sure. Sorry, complete diversion into nothing. But Welch is a really cool place. There used to be a Coors production facility there, and then that shut down and pretty much killed Welch. The whole place sort of fell apart, and it's a very prototypical West Virginia town, which means it's like a town you've never seen before in your fucking life if you've never been into the mountains. To get to it, you basically drive through utter mountainous Black Hills fucking wilderness, Appalachian chaos. And then the abandoned homes that are on the side of the road start being less and less abandoned until all of a sudden you're like, am I approaching a town? And then you're on the main drag in Welch. And it's just nestled in the middle of these like 4 or 5 hills and spreads up onto the sides of them. And it's on the sides of one of those hills that Jeannette Walls' family built a home. And actually did not build a home. It sort of infested an already rotting sort of lean-to structure. The name of the book itself, The Glass Castle, comes from a plan outlined by Rex to build his home. He's got all these blueprints and stuff. He's going to build his ultimate home for his family to live in, called the Glass Castle. He gets as far as digging a gigantic trash pit, and never an ounce closer to it. Once they get to Welsh, their lives really fall apart in earnest. And while they're still in the American Southwest, you get a feeling that there's kind of like hope for the family, despite some of the stuff that they go through because of Jeanette's narration, because at the time, as a kid, she felt more like maybe mom and dad will pull this around. And like dad, he actually, one of the formative scenes in the early parts is she it's her birthday and he hasn't gotten her a gift. So he takes her out into the desert where there's all kinds of stars. If you've never been out into the American desert or any desert really, the stars are fucking incredible. It's everywhere. You can see everything, and he points out Venus, and he gives her Venus as a birthday gift, which I don't think anybody can do. But it's kind of that feeling is kind of throughout the he does grand gestures and these big beautiful things, but they're ultimately very hollow and empty because where he should really be providing, he's not. And when they're in Welch, they're true white trash, true hill trash. Living hand to mouth, dumpster scavenging. Mom gets a job and dad steals the money so that he can go drink. He does pool hall scams. Jeanette is almost, as a child, I think she's like between 12 and 14 years old. She's like his backup during a pool scam and actually almost gets sexually assaulted. She does get sexually assaulted. She almost gets fully raped by a man who's sort of, getting scammed in this case. And I think her dad doesn't even bail her out. I think she bails herself out. He just leaves on her. So he's a piece of shit. And basically the whole, the audience relationship to the book the entire time is realizing in the first few chapters that dad's a piece of shit, and then kind of being almost like screaming at the book in the last thirds of it. Just being like, he is a piece of shit. Do not forgive him. Leave. Fucking leave. Like seriously, almost just screaming at it. But eventually she does. There's a time where they actually save up money to go to New York, her and her older sister, Lori. Because they stayed there for a while with their grandmother, and their grandmother, they caught her molesting their younger brother, Brian. And then they got kicked out of that house, and they're like, oh, dad probably got molested too. That's not good. So, there is no family for them. And so they eventually realize that their mom's a piece of shit too. There's actually a horrible scene where they save up money, I think, and they buy themselves a chocolate bar. And they're starving, or their mom has actually spent their money on a chocolate bar, and they're starving, and they're like, can we have some of the chocolate bar? And she eats it in front of them. It doesn't give them a bit, which is, you're a bad mother. You're a terrible mother. Like, what the fuck? But they save up money to go to New York, and dad steals it and drinks it away, which is, I think kind of like the real last straw with them. They're like, no more, we can't forgive you anymore. And then all kinds of other little things happen. It's really just 100 vignettes of life in West Virginia and life growing up poor and life growing up near addicts. That especially if you come into contact with that world, or if you had to live in it, you'll really see a lot of things that you're familiar with, if not comfortable with, very much familiar with. Which I'm going to get back to, but. After she goes to New York is pretty much the end of the story. Her dad dies. Eventually, mom and dad move to New York too, so they can try to sponge off their kids. It gets to a point where none of the kids will let them even into their apartments, and so they end up living homeless in Central Park, and then also in derelict houses down on. I think this is the 1980s, so it would probably be in probably the Village, Greenwich Village and stuff. I think they had a bunch of abandoned like factories and warehouses and stuff on that side of Manhattan Island back then, and people would squat in them. As I recall, I think that's one of the places where the dude from Rent is squatting. The writer, it's burning his stuff. He's squatting in one of those things while he's trying to write his little play. That was so dismissive. His very wonderful play. in real life, that did happen. Lori, the older sister, pretty much went to New York first before any of them. And there was kind of a feeling of abandonment, but she eventually was like, all right, I'm settled now. I don't have to deal with y'all shit. Like, Jeannette, you come and live with me. Lori actually became an artist and worked on Archie comics, which is pretty fucking cool. And then Jeannette came up. She ended up going, I think she went to, what's that nice college that's up there? Columbia. I think she went to Columbia or whatever it is. She ended up becoming a gossip columnist of sorts. She worked at a bunch of New York City publications, including Phoenix, I believe, and ended up most notably becoming a gossip columnist for MSNBC. And she did a lot of that column writing, which is why they call her a journalist, even though I don't really consider gossip columns high journalism, but to each his own. I'm really glad that she made it out of there doing whatever. And then that was mostly through the 80s and 90s and then into the early 2000s when she finally got that MSNBC job and became a fairly well-respected person in her own right. And then she wrote The Glass Castle, I believe, shortly after her father died in real life, or maybe like a little while, shortly in the span of life. So, 5 or 6 years, but I can't really remember much of the timeline. You should really read the book, but a thing that really stands out to me is the pit where the glass castle is supposed to grow. So I'm going to tell a story. This actually happened in my own real life. There was a kid that lived up the street from me. I cannot remember his name to this day. We'll say it's Dave. And I ran into him the same way you run into any other kid and start becoming like friends when you're 8, 9 years old, which is what we were at the time. He lived in one of those houses that smells bad from the outside. If you don't know what that's like, I mean, I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. It's like the standard boxy story and a half house with a basement. And sometimes this is one of those houses, and I started getting a feel for them when I was a kid. Because you can smell the inside of the house before you get up to it. It's not like trash, but it's that it just smells like sweat and wet and people. And you can smell it right on the other side of the door. And you know when you go inside that it's going to be one of those places where you're like, I'm really uncomfortable at how bad this smells. And then you'll get used to it. And then once you get back outside, the air feels cooler. Even if it's the muggiest July day, the air feels cooler and fresher and like lighter when you breathe it. It's that kind of house. But I think we played some stupid fucking runaround game, tag, some shit like that, And I would start going up there because he had an original Nintendo. I had a Nintendo 64, or not Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This would have been, if I was 7, 8 years old, this would have been 94, 95, mid-90s. And I would go up there and I'd play his Nintendo. But hey man, you want to go play Nintendo? Like I love it because he had Mega Man. Mega Man X is my favorite video game pretty much ever. It's like one of the first video games I ever had, and I loved it. He would play. He had the original Mega Man 1, 2, and 3, which is actually Mega Man on the front cover, and he's not a robot like the traditional Japanese anime style drawing of him that exists now everywhere. It's like he's like a middle-aged white guy with a stupid blue Tron helmet on and like a little gun. But yeah, that was the Mega Man game. We would go and play it, and in his house of bad smells and dark curtains, he had those cloth. I mean, cloth doesn't really make sense. The curtains were those kind of curtains that I don't see anymore that are on these steel runners at the top, and they back and forth open. And the fabric that makes them is that same sort of knit fabric that's on those terribly uncomfortable couches that people thankfully stopped making in the late 90s. It's like orange rope over or yellowish gold rope over like an orange, almost like a corduroy type fabric. And he had those, and they'd always be orange because his grandma would stay in their living room, which is cluttered. A wire leg TV tables with like Formica tops and the couch that's always got like 3 fucking full laundry baskets on it that all smell like real sweaty. And his dad would sit in the easy chair, and I think grandma was in some sort of fucking like automatic or semi-automatic wheelchair type deal, and she had tubes in her. I think mostly for breathing. I think she had like a big oxygen tank or something like that. And I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back on it, I was like, okay, Dad drank. So, we would kind of hang out, and we weren't like great friends. I think the entirety of this story takes place over maybe a month, but in kid times it feels like a fucking year, but it was definitely not even outside of that same season. His dad in the backyard, one of the first times I ever hung out with him, he was building a frame because he wanted to have a treehouse. I was like, oh, I have a treehouse too. My dad built it for me. And the guy's like, nice. So he's nailing together the bottom frame for a treehouse, which if you don't know what a frame looks like, it's just basically imagine a big square that's about 10 by 10 feet. And then inside you have joists that go up and down. So it's kind of like a little cage door. And it was up against the side of their detached garage in the backyard, and you could see it from the sidewalk if you knew where to look. And when you build something like that, when you first build it, all the boards are gold, because that's just the wood, the color that wood is. It's always kind of shiny. It's real fresh and new. And so that was there, and he had built that frame one of the first times I ever hung out with that kid, and leaned it up against the side, and they were going to put it in the tree. They had like a sort of, I don't know, maple tree or something like that was right next to the garage, and they were hanging up in there. And so, I would go over to this kid's house and hang out and stuff, and the kid was always kind of weird, a little dirty, always wearing like a white t-shirt, like an undershirt instead of like a shirt. And so we went into his room one time and we were playing games, and then he got called out, and I was just not even paying attention. I was like, okay, I'll just play my game, because to get into that room, you had to go through the entire house, and then that room is actually in the front part of the house next to the front door, but you had to go through a bunch of fucking rooms to get into it. And he's gone for a little while, and then when he comes back in, he's like sort of like sniffling, and he comes up to me and goes like, why were you looking at my grandma? And I said, what? And then he hit me, and I was like, what the fuck? He slapped me in the face. He goes, why are you looking at my grandma and laughing at her? I was like, I didn't fucking look at your grandma and laugh at her, in like little kid words. So I was like, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? I was like, get out of my house. You can't laugh at my grandma like that. I swear to God, I didn't laugh at his grandma or so much as look at her, because she was fucking horrifying to me. She's crazy, a crippled old silent crone. Like I would say like, hi, like a little kid does. I surely wasn't pausing in that foul smelling living room to look at that old woman and laugh at her on my way to Nintendo. And so I left the house and never hung out with that kid again. And I really never saw him. To this day, looking back on it, that kid was almost never outside of that house. He kind of like was relegated to the inside of that bedroom. And his bedroom was very, very tiny, dark too. Curtains were always up. Curtains were always over every window in that house. I don't know why. It might have been one of those, poor white trash ways of conserving fucking air conditioning. You cover up everything so the greenhouse effect can't get in your house. His bed was on the floor, and that's why we would sit on the bed on the floor. And then he had a little tiny, like 12-inch screen tube TV on one of them fucking Formica and wireframe TV stand deals, and then his games were on the ground underneath that, and everything else was just strewn around clothes and stuff. And so I would go past that. I had other friends that were on the block too, and I never introduced them to them, even though his house was closer to theirs than mine. He was only 3 down from Kevin Stapleton and 1 across and 2 down from John Williams, who I used to hang out with back in the day. Friends until puberty, and then forgotten entirely type deal. But I would walk past that house and try to look out for him, just because I see him, and maybe like one day like just say like, hey man, I didn't mean to do that, because it very clearly he had gone into that other room and been hit by his dad, who I think glared at me as I left the house. But I never saw the kid outside. I never saw him. I'd like to think that he got out, somehow and was taken somewhere else. But every time I would walk by that house, I would see the frame that his dad had built leaning up against the garage still. And they never added another single piece to that. And every year it got a little greener and a little greener with mold. And then the summer would come and dry it out and twist it until I remember seeing it. And there was just like this blackened, twisted, mostly rotten hunks of wood, to the point where the wood had shrank away from the nails, and you could see the little lines of the nails rusted in place between the boards. And then that would have been when I was like 12-ish, and I stopped having to walk that direction to go to middle school, and it didn't even dawn on me until right around I was graduating high school, because I had to go to high school. I had to walk the other direction. I would have never looked in his backyard. to go over there and look in the backyard, and it was gone. And I guess maybe another family lived there or something. But I think about that fucking frame for that treehouse, and it's like I literally watched a kid's childhood die and then rot and then vanish like it never was, because his dad was a drunk dick. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the entirety of the story. There's not much to learn there except for, if you threaten to build your kid a treehouse, you better fucking do it, because God only knows what kind of damage you're doing to him if you're the kind of person that won't finish that shit. And I've always hated people, really deeply hated people that don't finish stuff that they start for that reason, especially stuff that they start for other people. It gets into me. It crawls around the same way that the memory of that fucking treehouse base does. And so that's what the glass castle reminded me of, with that big pit. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. We got a little dark there at the end, but I don't know. It's a story I like telling on occasion, because, like all painful things, it's much less painful the second time around. Because you either build up scar tissue or you kill off nerve cells, and then you feel a little stronger because you tank that second hit. But anyway, folks, that's pretty much the end of the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club episode for July of 2019. I hope you enjoyed the mild amounts of rambling. I hope you learned something. I hope you're interested in going out and checking some stuff out. Definitely subscribe to Shudder. I am going to fucking fight tooth and nail. I'm going to beg Audio Boom to get them on as sponsors, just so I can maybe get a free subscription. Because, dude, Shudder is the shit. Go check out Shudder. You can't really be a true horror fan and not subscribe to that service. If you do, there's so many good movies that are there. And if you go that way, check out Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. He's the man. His interruptions are very, very entertaining, and there's a lot of good movies there. And I'll be mentioning some of them next season. If you guys stick around, next season starts October 4th, I think it is. Between then, we should have some sort of announcement in the way of merch coming out. It's actually something I'm going to be getting on to doing after I'm done with this podcast. And in the meantime, go ahead, barnstorm back through our back catalog. If you enjoyed this, hey, I will curse you. I will put a curse on you if you don't go and give me a 5-star rating on wherever you're doing. That's a thing now, and YouTubers are always threatening their audience, because I guess it's a better call to action. But wherever you are, whatever you're listening to this on, give me a 5-star rating or a thumbs up or whatever, and comment and tell me how much you liked it or didn't like it, because every one of those little comments helps me grow a bit and get out in front of more people. It doesn't matter what podcatcher you're on. iTunes is kind of like the most basic one. Head over to iTunes to do that. I'm on Himalaya, and there's also Stitcher. Obviously, Stitcher's a great one. That's our people for the day, our sponsors for this episode. Thanks a bunch, you guys. If you don't want to do any of that and you still want to talk to me, hey, hit me up on Facebook, facebook.com/Westside Fairytales, Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club 2. Hit those up, join them, jump in the conversation. You can find me on Twitter at WS Fairytales, on Instagram, Westside Fairytales. I'm on YouTube too, is Westside Fairytales. I think I'm going to start doing some stuff on there now that Monstro is wrapped up, and God only knows if anything will be happening with that show. If I end up stopping working for Incongruity and shit, I'm going to be starting doing a lot more ancillary Westside Fairytale stuff, including, I think, if you guys have ever heard the game Dead by Daylight, it's a horror-based asymmetrical 3-verse or 4-verse 1 thing. Basically, you play as a fucking serial killer, and you try to kill 4 people before they can power up 5 generators and escape through doors on the sides of the level. And it's a real blast, and I might start playing that shit on Twitch. I know, I'm that guy. Another person talking about their Twitch, but it's not active yet, and who knows if it will be. I play a lot of that game, so either way. If you guys want to send me a direct message, go ahead and email me at westsidefairytales@gmail.com. If you want to give us some money, head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Westside Fairytales. Westside Fairytales anywhere. Hit up Westside Fairytales on Google, and it'll get you where you need to go. But anyway, hit us up on Patreon. For just $1, you can get early access to episodes like this and much more. For $5, you get your name on the website. You get early access to even cooler stuff. For $10, you get merch. I'll send you some bookmarks and stickers. You get your name on the website, and you get super early access to raw versions of the regular show, which come out almost 2 weeks in advance, which is pretty cool. And for $20 or more, you can get PDFs, original PDFs of the stories on the regular episodes. I just sent those out yesterday. Actually, if you're listening, they should have an email in your inbox, and they should be in there. I lay them out with the artwork that's done by our incredible artwork layout lady, Yui Breedlove, who's incredible. You should check her out. Fiercely Art on Instagram, and of course, actually, I don't know what. Of course, oh yeah, and of course, if you give us $50, we'll send you I'll print out and sign any story that you want it. And I'll send it to you. And also, once we get the merch store open, each tier is going to come with its own discount code for use on the Squarespace website. On our website, which is on Squarespace, that means nothing to you. Our website in our merch store, because we found out that we can actually hook all that sort of stuff up. So anyway, thanks a bunch for hanging out, sticking around with me. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you love the content. If you do, rate and review, all that nice stuff. And until next time, as always, stay safe out there. Westside Fairytales is written, read, scored, and produced by Tyler Bell. Episode artwork by Yui Breedlove. All content herein copyright WSF Productions, LLC, 2019.